Each day we strive to make it Black home, Black to the future, Black in one piece. Where being Black is a bop, like a song we replay every 3 minutes and 30 seconds of every day. Where being Black is a vibe, all the time. You're listening to TMBP Media with your host, Dr. Tasha. Welcome back to Black in One Piece. Today we have with us Terry Terrell. Can you share with us what you do professionally and then any pertinent information before we jump into this conversation?
My name is Terry Terrell. I am the owner of Odyssey Counseling and Consulting, which is a group practice. I am a therapist. I do so many different things.
Yeah.
So that question speaks to so many different places that I operate in greatness. Terry Talks is what I go by online on Facebook. It's something that I initially started to kind of not have my clients all of my business and searching me. But then I started doing a little bit more, speaking to people, and I kind of like the moniker, so I kept it.
It stuck.
Yeah, it stuck. I also am a co-founder of a group, a platform called Black Men's Locker, which speaks to minority males' mental health. We do things with parenting. We do things that helps men in tight spaces. We had a conference in Wichita, Kansas last year. We're trying to build that. We have about 12,000 plus men across the world, and we're really starting to catch fire. We want to make sure that we're foundationally sound before we branch out, but great things in store.
Yes, sounds amazing. I can't wait to learn more about it. Where do you consider home?
I think home is wherever you make it. Home is wherever your support is and that you have people that you love. So for me, that's Wichita, Kansas, but I have family everywhere. Also used to live with my dad growing up, Texas. I have a lot of family in Texas. I have family in Oklahoma. I had a cousin that just got married in Atlanta, went down there for his marriage, and it was a lot of people from all over. And it was, like I said, I think home is wherever you make it, because we were all jamming and had a good time there in the ATLs.
Okay. Who should we talk to know all things Terry?
I think my kids know me sometimes, but then we have conversations. I'm like, you don't know me. My wife knows me well. That's a tough question. You are different positions in different places to different people. And every person that you deal with them with a different hat on. You probably have to talk to God and have some prayer to know all the versions of me.
That's good, yeah.
But my heart is for people and encouraging and uplifting. And so, I mean, hopefully a conversation with anybody that within my close circle would be able to give you some bits and pieces of who I am.
How do you identify when it comes to race and ethnicity?
I'm definitely a Black man. I think anywhere you put me, I'm probably going to be a Black man. Only within the last couple of years, I've really, as an adult, deep diving into my past and finding out that I have some Indian in my past and I have some people in Oklahoma. A lot of that information was lost because of racial oppression. If you were Indian there, it didn't end well for you. So a lot of documentation got lost. When we had family reunions, charting the paths of some of my generational people and what that looks like. I identify as a Black man, if it was just to generalize it, but there's so many things in me and everyone nowadays.
With you starting to learn more about your extended family and history, how do you define Blackness?
How do I define Blackness? I think Blackness is a feeling. I think Blackness is you can say a culture, but I think Blackness is something that's understood by those who are operating in that space. It's hard to explain that to somebody who's outside of that space.
That's actually a perfect segue into my next question, which is around something I call peak Blackness. Those moments when you're just like, man, I love being Black, or I love us. What is peak Blackness for you?
Peak Blackness for me would be watching some of the youth and the dance videos and some of the culture, and their hair might be a little crazy, but they're jamming and having a good time, and they're really engulfed in who they are and who they are as a group. To me, that's peak Blackness, because when I see it, it brings a smile to my face, because that's something that I can also share with my kids, something that's positive about us. As a Black professional now, I also see Black greatness, excellence in certain positions, Black lawyers, doctors, physicians, people of different crafts. And when you see that, I'm like, that's us right there. That's who we've been all along. We just have not had the equity to be able to operate in certain spaces like we could. So I got to add that, because there's so many elements to us at different levels that still have excellence that exudes from us.
In having these conversations, this was my favorite question to ask, hearing everyone's perspective on what's peak Blackness. Typically, it always came back to something around us gathering, whether we know each other or not, but it's going to be a good time when we all come together. But also those other demonstrations and examples of greatness have come up a lot too. When we think about peak Blackness and that greatness, have you ever wanted to be anything other than Black, and why or why not?
I think when you're operating in that space, you don't know what's what. Especially when I was younger, I was put in spaces where I had labels put on me. For example, when I was in middle school to high school, I had some behavioral stuff. And instead of finding out what was wrong with me, they just put me in some lower educational stuff. They figured something was wrong with me psychologically. I was doing great in these classes, but that really was not the thing. I say that to bring a little focus to what happens to a lot of our youth with people who are not culturally competent about some things that oppress us as people of color, and then how that affects us growing up. When I got into high school, started figuring out where I was being placed, and I was like, I want to be in regular classes because I have something to give. And I encountered counselors, teachers that would tell me, no, you're not ready yet. And then I would make straight A's. They were like, oh, just give it a little bit more time. You're not quite ready for that. So I had to fight my way out of the labels and the things that were placed on me. And I don't know if they lacked cultural knowledge and competency or if it was a racial thing. But when you see that type of stuff, it's not unfamiliar to some of us. When they actually put me in those classes, I was making the best grades. And it was kind of like, see, I told you type of deal, you know? Kind of a feel-good type of thing.
You talked about education, more experiential things. Are there other aspects of your life that you would say have shaped your view of Blackness?
I think your understanding as a person of color growing up is different for everyone. You're in a box depending on what state you're in, what environment. Growing up, my dad lived in Texas. My mom lived here in Wichita, Kansas, and going between the parents, I was able to go to Houston, Texas, and live there and see young Black entrepreneurs, 18, 19 years old, stepping out of Bentleys and Mercedes. The representation was there, and it gave me a bigger vision of what could be that really affects a lot of our youth, because when they are in small town, conservative places that don't have great representation, it does put their vision of who they can be in a box. It stifles their understanding of who they could be. But my grandfather was a pastor and an activist. My uncles were pastors. And so I was able to tap into the identity of who I was from my faith, and not necessarily being confined by the labels that people put on me growing up. That helped me step out of a lot of oppression and labels and things that were put on me when you start talking about who God says you are versus what they say you can and can't do because of the color of your skin.
When you talk about labeling, one of the first thing people see is what you look like. How would you describe your hair, whether that's the texture or how you style it, and then also your skin complexion? And if you feel like those components of your identity have impacted the way you show up as a Black man, as a Black person in the world, or your interactions, any of that?
That's a heavy question. My hair, growing up, I wanted the long hair. I don't know if that's a young people thing or whatever, but at one point I had hair down to my shoulders.
Wow.
Braids.
We need photos.
Don't do me. Because I'm sure my mom and them got some. I don't always like their photos, but I had cornrows. And I was really buying into an image that I saw. Versus as I started getting a little bit older, evolving in my thinking, I did want a more clean-cut look. As far as my skin color, I think us as people of color really deal with colorism. We've internalized it, and it pretty much manifests in how we deal with each other on a daily basis. My wife is a lot darker than me. When we first started dating, I would call her my chocolate. But her experience with her skin tone was a lot different being in the South. So she immediately felt some type of way till she learned my heart about what I was saying. But I also had to recognize as a person of lighter complexion that there's spaces that I can walk into and have conversations that my darker friends can't. There's conversations I can have, and there's things that I can challenge people on. When they first see me, there's not any barrier to how they see me versus somebody from a darker hue coming and having a conversation. They're immediately observed as aggressive or subconscious biases that they've already had. Knowing that as I started to grow up, I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, though, that we all have some version of entitlement.
Zoe, we had a conversation about that during her episode around the privilege that is attached to different skin complexions. But I've had other conversations where I think one of the things our society as a whole struggles with is empathy, both in conversations I've seen online, but also conversations I've had. It's one of those things where if you yourself haven't lived it or experienced it, then all of a sudden it's never happened or it's not a thing. So I've had conversations where I'm talking about, now this is based in my personal experience and my research, where it is a fact that colorism is real and how it shows up impacts job prospects, romantic prospects, all aspects of our life. So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. Shifting gears just a tad, lighten it up a little bit.
Okay. Oh, were we heavy?
I mean, I'm used to having these convos, but one of the reasons why this podcast is important to me is because anything I'm doing, I want to make sure we are highlighting the fullness of the Black experience. Yeah. So there is that heaviness to it sometimes and struggle, but there's so much more to it than that.
It's hard to have these conversations in small compartmentalized spaces. But when we get into a larger space and we're having these conversations with larger groups, that's when the disagreements start really coming out, because we're not a monolith. There's so many different versions and ideas, and because you were raised in this culture versus this, you may believe political stuff. Somebody that looks like us might be a Republican, they might be a Democrat, they might be an independent in their views. Sometimes there's some divide there, but
so you and I both are graduates of Spark Community Business Academy.
Shout out to Sparks.
Yes, shout out to Spark Create Campaign. And I had the pleasure of being invited to teach Cohort 4, which, so I just got to say this, y'all. It's Cohort 2 all day, all right? But I also do have love for Cohort 4.
Little biased there, huh? Little biased there.
I just got to say it. But I bring that up because Create Campaign and Spark, they're just such great resources for aspiring or existing entrepreneurs, particularly underserved and underrepresented entrepreneurs. I wanted to get your thoughts on your experience in Spark and as an entrepreneur, some of the challenges, but also the triumphs that you've had. Thinking about if your experience has been impacted at all because of being Black.
Entrepreneurship runs in my blood. And I was always finding things, some contracting positions or something that allowed me to feel like I was running a business. Even when I was younger, I had vending machines. I was trying to get in different places. I've always had the entrepreneur kind of pull, but only as I started getting older, I was kind of like, you know what is my thing? You know, what is it that's going to be for me? Because I feel like it's going to happen, but I didn't know exactly what it was. Again, shout out to Sparks. It's an awesome opportunity. As I was pursuing, I started doing a lot of working, mentoring, teaching, creating mentor programs. I just had a heart for people. Spending 10 plus years in social work, at certain points in time, it was always about getting better and doing more and reaching more. When I was substitute, I would go into different schools. I would never lock myself into one specific space because I said all the boys need to see Black men that are articulate, that dress well. When they would see me, the little boys, what's your name? Say, Mr. T. Okay, Mr. T, am I going to see you tomorrow? Okay. Yeah. And it made them lift their head up a little bit higher. So the representation that I was able to give the youth in those spaces really did allow me to feel more empowered to continue to climb the charts. After working in different fields, I was like, what am I going to do now? I couldn't quite figure out what it was going to be. I started asking people I was working with, the therapists, what do you do? I'm a therapist. What do you do? I'm a therapist. And different credentials, I started diving into some of that. And along the way, I started finding my path. I've always had the spirit of encouragement, no matter what field I was doing or where I was at. That all came to a head once I got a psychology degree in my bachelor's and kept on working. I'm a therapist now, working on my clinical license. I have a lot going on.
That excites me because everyone knows I'm super pro therapy. It's therapy period over here. And I just know what it has done for me in my life. But I also recognize that for a variety of reasons, everyone may not be ready, whether it's stigma or financial barriers, whatever the case may be. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing to find other ways to still bring some of that support, not as a replacement for therapy, but a space to talk in different ways, support Black men, Black youth in our community. A lot of my work in workshops has focused lately on being rooted in wellness. The idea of hustle and grind culture can become so toxic and unhealthy. So being intentional about prioritizing ourselves and our self-care and boundaries within all of that, and also rethinking self-care became a buzzword or term or phrase and became something for people to make money off of. So it kind of lost the depth of what it really is about. I'm bringing all that up to ask, I know from a Black woman's perspective, and I have these conversations a lot with Black women in the community, but I'm not talking to as many Black men. As an entrepreneur and as a Black man, are there any things in particular that you see as pain points, as my husband likes to say, or struggles for Black men, and any top suggestions or recommendations you might have, especially for those who don't necessarily have access to mental health care at the moment?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many. The statistics show that there's only 25% of African Americans that are pursuing mental health, in contrast to 40% of our white counterparts.
Wow.
When you have that and take into account that we also have a lot of generational stuff that's passed down to us without us knowing that we have to work through.
Yeah.
And then men, we deal with so many other things, especially as a Black man, the expectations and the oppression and the things that we deal with in the world. There's so many things that you could point at, but there's so much life and so much greatness in us that we're starting to see come out because we're having more conversations about mental health. Yeah. We're starting to lift the stigma that used to was so heavy upon us. And now we're starting to have conversations about what self-care looks like. For real.
Yeah.
Instead of the capitalized version of what it is presented in America. Most folks, you ask them what self-care is, and they're like, go spend some money. Not go walk in the park, not something small. For Black men, there's so many different things that really compress us. That's a passion that I have, especially as a Black man. Only as I start working on myself did I actually start seeing the intricate details of how deep it really goes for us. Some of the childhood wounds we carry and the lack of safe spaces we have to divulge those things. And even sometimes when we attach ourselves to really good women, some of them aren't trained to know how to create safe spaces for Black men to have conversations about things that was embarrassing to us and not point the finger and say, you weak for that, you know? As Black men, we're operating in a society that really put so many different confines on us and put us in performance-based spaces that if we're not performing, then we don't get love. If we're not giving, then we don't deserve to be given to type of mentality. And a lot of people are taking on that type of mindset, and it's really self-destructive. Because if you look at the ethnicity and how we deal with each other, there's a lot of toxic rhetoric between Black men and women now. We're starting to tear each other down and say who you are, and men are always this and women are always that. It has to be broken down. We have to relearn how to love each other as a culture.
How do you display your Blackness on a day-to-day?
I don't think I think about it as my Blackness. I think of it as being a good father, being as a good husband, being a good mentor, being a good therapist, and operating the greatness that God has placed in my life and wanting to see that come to full fruition. I focus on that first, because if you start looking at it from the context of now I have to be the best Black therapist, that pressure is a little bit too heavy for anybody to bear. It's already some pressure for some of us who are professionals to operate in spaces where we're not the majority.
Right.
And then hold a standard in which they look at us and decide, are all Black people like this, or are they the exception? So I don't think I look at it from the context of what is the best Black version for me. I look at it through the roles I play and who God has made me to be in those roles.
I love that. Before we round everything out with our main question of the day, we talked about Blackness, about aspects of Black culture. Do you think that Blackness and Black culture are the same?
I guess it depends on who you ask, because we all have different experiences. And again, we're not a monolith. So what's Blackness for me might be tied to some oppression, colorism, or where I came from. And someone else might have had great experience growing up with people of color You go to Houston areas, Dallas areas, Atlanta, it's a lot of us there. And the experience is a little bit different when you don't have labels and things that are placed on you. You let your guard down a little bit because you're not worried about if somebody's going to clutch their purse, implicit biases. Again, it goes back to who you asked. It could be both. Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
You know?
So that brings us to the question of the day. Usually I do this like little pre-conversation at the top before we start, but y'all, I was struggling today, so we're going to do it now. But just sharing a little bit about the impetus for Black in One Piece. Before 2020, after 2020, it's always something in the news about something disgusting, horrible, traumatic that's happening to Black people, shown over and over and over. I have been burnt out for so long from my dissertation research that I didn't want to think about another study or project, but for whatever reason, I was ready. I was like, all we're trying to do is make it Black home, Black to the future, Black in One Piece. That's literally it. So, Terry, what does Black in One Piece mean to you?
Sometimes we get lost in the labels that we try to.
Sorry, Siri's trying to talk to us, y'all.
She hasn't chimed in on my. Siri, you Black?
See? Look, okay.
Siri's like, listen, hold on. Let me get
I got something to say. Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, let me start again.
Yes.
That took me out. Okay.
So random.
Black, wow. They're always listening. Black in One Piece.
They'd be watching. I'm sorry.
I'm telling you, but that's very true, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes we feel, unfortunately, that's the truth about being Black in certain spaces is we are being watched. We are being listened to underneath a different level of standard than others, than our counterparts. Being Black in One Piece for me is understanding that I need to provide for my children and sometimes mentoring other kids, other people, giving information and knowledge and wisdom about who we are, the greatness that we have as a people, the resilience that we have as people of color, conveying that and not getting caught up on what was done to us. Sometimes we get caught so much in that and explaining what happened to us to people who are not willing to have the conversation about it. So for me, being Black in One Piece is learning to operate in my greatness, celebrating the Black figures that came before me, celebrating the Black faces that are existing right now that are doing so much to move the movement forward, sharing that with the youth, and then allowing myself to be great in the space that I'm in without being confined to the labels that they want to put on me.
Terry, tell the people where they can find out all the great things that you have going on.
Terry Talks is the moniker I coined. It's on Facebook. I always use that platform for positivity, encouragement, sometimes challenging people on their thoughts. And I also put a lot of therapy, different type of stuff on there. I'm working on getting another platform together where I can do more therapy conversations and expose people to different information. I have my business, Odyssey Counseling Consultant. You can also catch me in the podcast that we do on the Black Men's Locker platform to help encourage and uplift other men, Black men, in the mental health space and have conversations about the things that affect us, and then the information that we are looking for to help create the safe spaces all together. I took this phrase from Denzel Washington. I am trying to be intentional and deliberate about what God has placed in me and trying to be that light without allowing other people to change the temperature of what I have going on internally so that I can continue to help guide other people in such a way that it's encouraging, inspiring them to do other things. And when I am going to do other things, you'll see it because I give glory to God first.
Absolutely. There's so many amazing things that Terry has going on. Be sure to check those out. And until next time, stay Black in One Piece.